In the dim shadows of history, the Fabian Society emerged, cloaked in secrecy and whispers. Their origins stretch back to a time when Rome, a city of power and cunning, laid the groundwork for their clandestine manoeuvres. They adopted the Roman strategy of subtle infiltration, operating in the shadows, to shape society's future. Watch closely, for behind their seemingly noble intentions, they harbour ambitions that could alter the course of history. Beware, for their true motives remain shrouded in utter darkness. The Fabian Society took its name from Quintus Fabius Maximus, a Roman general known as the Delayer. Instead of direct confrontation, he employed a strategy of attrition against the enemies, wearing them down over time. The society adopted this name to symbolize their approach: gradual, strategic influence, rather than sudden, overt actions. The Society's motto: remold the world. From the strategic brilliance of ancient Rome, the Fabian Society transitioned into Victorian England, embracing a new era of intellectual and political influence. Inspired by the cunning tactics of their namesake, they sought to reshape society with calculated, gradual change. Their vision was to mould a better future, one thoughtful step at a time, but it had dark connotations. So just so we get the idea of location and where we are, 61 Petitco, France, and as you see behind me, as I've just featured, is the current home of the Fabian Society. Now I will put up a picture of its previous look. It was a little bit more inviting, a little bit more pronounced, but on my visit here, they've removed their signage. Now, is this a sign of hiding? Is this a sign of retreating back to operate from the shadows? Who knows? I will not be able to get a comment from that, but it's been said that the building now is looking very indescript, where it was once a proud, prominent place and display. What do we take from this? It's anybody's guess, but what I can say is, when signage is removed in the world, but operations still remain, it worries me. The Fabian Society was established here in London, January 1884. It emerged as a response to the rapid industrial changes of that era and sought to influence social reform through gradual intellectual means rather than revolutionary upheaval. Sidney and Beatrice Webb were the central figures behind its founding. They were joined by other notable intellectuals of the time, including George Bernard Shaw and H.G. Wells, both of whom would go on to have significant influence in their own rights. The Society's early members were largely drawn from the intellectual and academic circles, aiming to promote a form of socialism that emphasised gradual change and the power of education and policy. Sidney and Beatrice Webb were motivated by a vision of a society reformed through careful, gradual change. They believed that socialism could be achieved through education, policy, and democratic means rather than the usual revolutions. Their ideals leaned towards a form of democratic socialism, emphasizing the role of state intervention in the economy to achieve social justice. Now, although they were not communists in the strict sense, their emphasis on social reform and the state of involvement in social welfare found some resonance with broader socialists and even communist movements globally of the time. The Webbs were inspired by the idea that scientifically planned society could lead to a fairer and more equitable world. They saw the society as a way to bring together like-minded individuals to push these reforms on the public. It was during the 19th and early 20th centuries the Webbs' vision of gradual social reform through state intervention was seen as a rational, scientific approach to achieving social justice. However, with the benefit of hindsight, this approach has been criticised for being somewhat narrow-sighted. This gradualist approach, while well-intentioned at the time, often underestimated the complexity and the diversity of societal needs. It created a framework that could sometimes stifle alternative viewpoints and led to a more top-down control of social policies. Over time, this method has been criticised for creating a sort of controlling narrative where a small elite societal change potentially at the expense of the public broader input. In the modern context, these ideas have evolved, but the core principle of centralised planned reform still sometimes faces scrutiny. Critics argue that this approach can limit dynamism and adaptability of a society while making it harder to respond to rapid changes and diverse needs. Over time, this method has been criticised for creating a sort of controlling narrative where a small elite guided societal change, it potentially at the expense of a broader public input. Sidney and Beatrice Webb were influential figures, but their work was not without controversy. Their advocacy for a planned state-driven form of socialism often drew criticism from those who feared it could lead to an overly centralised and controlling government. Some contemporaries saw their vision as a threat. This was a threat to individual liberties and a form of intellectual elitism. Moreover, the Webbs were sometimes accused of being too close to the political establishment, which led to allegations that they were part of a shadowy influence on policy behind the scenes. Their links to the Labour Party and their role in shaping its early policies and policies of today were also points of contention and continue to be so. In modern times, these criticisms have been revisited, with some arguing that their vision, while initially well-intentioned, may have inadvertently paved the way for a more centralised control in policy making. While George Orwell didn't explicitly base 1984 on the Webbs or the Fabian Society, there are indeed thematic parallels that can be drawn from this scenario. His portrayal of a controlled, centralised state in 1984 can be loosely interpreted as a cautionary reflection on the kind of gradualist, state-driven social reforms that the Webbs advocated. This doesn't mean that Orwell was directly referencing them, but it does highlight how certain ideas about centralised control and the potential dangers of it can resonate across the different contexts and eras. Although Orwell didn't single out the Fabians explicitly, his broader concerns about centralised control and the suppression of free thought definitely echoed the kind of concerns he had about gradualist approaches to socialism. An overview of that story. Now, it was released on June 8th, 1949. The publisher was Secker and Warburg. There were over 30 million copies sold worldwide to date. It's still widely available in many bookstores and online retailers. There were several key warning points in 1984, and it draws to the current parallels. One being surveillance. Orwell warned about pervasive government surveillance today. His concerns about digital surveillance and data privacy are more relevant than ever, with technology tracking our every move and our every transaction. Two was truth manipulation, and we see this with the current Labour Party. Orwell highlighted how language and truth could be manipulated. Today, issues like the suppression of certain viewpoints or the creation of terms that don't reflect reality, like Islamophobia, can be seen as a modern parallel. Freedom of speech. Orwell warned about the dangers of suppressing dissent and controlling the narrative. In the UK today, laws like the Online Safety Bill raise concerns about the potential silencing of certain voices and criminalisation of speech that doesn't align with the prevailing narrative. It's evident that in the current political landscape, the influence of the Fabians' ideals extends beyond just one political party. While we jump back to Tony Blair's era, it brought Fabianism into the mainstream. Within the Labour Party, members of the Fabian Society are found across the various political groups. This means that the gradual shift towards a more centralised, controlled system can come from multiple sides, making it a broader challenge to the demographic and democratic process. Essentially, it's a slow, incremental shift that can be observed from all corners of the political spectrum. Given Tony Blair's significant push towards a globalist agenda, including the idea of a borderless society and connections to the World Economic Forum and the WHO, there's a notable shift towards a more centralised global government. This vision, which includes controversial ideas like depopulation, has had a profound impact on the political landscape. In the wake of this, the Labour Party's struggle to regain power after so long a period has led to a sense of urgency under Keir Starmer's group. There's a perception that he is being guided to swiftly or slightly more speedily implement these globalist ideals, possibly to ensure the party's survival in the face of an upcoming general election, which might actually be called earlier than expected. Tony Blair, a figure synonymous with the modern Labour Party, has long been associated with the Fabian ideology. His vision of a more centralised global governance closely sits with the principles of the World Economic Forum, where national sovereignty takes a backseat to a globalist ideal and agenda. Blair's push for digital ID cards is telling. It's an example of this mindset. On the surface, it might be presented as a measure for safety, but history shows us these moves are less about security and more about control. The parallels with the systems in place, like, for example, China, are hard to ignore, where public surveillance is used to maintain tight grips on their populations. What's more, Blair's globalist leanings often seem to transcend the traditional boundaries of the British Parliament, raising more concerns about the sovereignty of the nation. It's a shift towards a centralised authority that could override local governance. In this context, the push for digital IDs isn't just about convenience, it's about the broader agenda of monitoring and controlling the populace. It's a stark reminder that the battle for individual freedoms and national sovereignty is ongoing, and the implications are profound. The last attempt to introduce IDs into the UK was met with significant resistance from the public, and it was for good reason. It coincided with the tumultuous COVID-19 period and the lockdowns. This is where the government tried to leverage centralised medical care and other measures and issues within one card. Ultimately, it failed to gain traction because the public rightly saw through the underlying agenda. It increased surveillance and control rather than appealed to genuine safety. Now, the new rationale being presented for digital IDs is the issue created by Labour and those Conservative Tories before of immigration. However, if you look at the track record of any other countries within Europe that have already implemented such systems, it shows it hasn't made a single difference. It hasn't made society safer, especially when it comes to managing undocumented immigration. The reality is that the general population would be subject to tighter controls while the problem of illegal immigration persists. This raises the question, what justifiable point or reason is there for this new push? The evidence is overwhelming and suggests it's not about safety, it's simply about control. In the end, the introduction of digital ID seems to serve the interests of the few rather than the many. It undermines the very freedoms that are supposed to be protected. The Fabian Society's influence has, over time, subtly shaped the political landscape, and in recent years we've seen a marked shift in the left-wing rhetoric. Where once there was room for discourse and debate, we now see an alarming trend towards intolerance and even violence against those who dissent. The ideals of tolerance and inclusivity have been twisted into forms of exclusion, where certain voices, particularly those of white straight men, that'd be me, are marginalised and thrown out. This shift is not just in the rhetoric, but the approach to public discourse. The space for reasonable debate is shrinking. It's replaced by a cancel culture that seeks to silence rather than engage. It's a paradox of the modern left, preaching inclusivity while practicing exclusivity, and claiming to champion free speech while actively suppressing it. This trend is reminiscent of the more authoritarian regimes of the past, where dissent was not just discouraged but eradicated. The fabric of open dialogue is being eroded, replaced by a rigid orthodoxy that brooks no opposition. In this climate, the push for control extends beyond just policy. It's about shaping the very mindset of the next generation. It's a concerning path, but one that's important to recognise and challenge if we're to preserve the essence of true discourse and freedom in our nations. When we consider the broader landscape, it's clear that certain ideologies and global agencies intersect in ways that might not be immediately obvious. For instance, the discourse surrounding the left wing in the West, there's a perception in certain quarters, including some Middle Eastern perspectives, that these left-leaning groups, and I quote, are seen as useful idiots. This label highlights a perceived naivety in the face of broader, more strategic agendas that aim to weaken national sovereignty and promote a more centralised global control and takeover. The tactics employed, whether it's the gradual erosion of free speech or the dismantling of traditional values, all serve a common end: the creation of a unified, controlled global society. The Fabians with their long-term incremental approach, and the World Economic Forum with their globalist vision. It's a form and a kind of alliance that pushes towards this end goal. From an educational standpoint, these connections and partners become clear, revealing how different factions and ideologies align to achieve a common vision. It's a sobering thought, but one that emphasises the importance of remaining vigilant and committed to open dialogue and true democratic values. In light of all these factors, the connections become unmistakable. Many individuals who hold influential positions within the Fabian Society also find themselves in the heart of the World Economic Forum. This overlap in membership isn't just a coincidence. It suggests a shared vision and a unified end goal. To believe otherwise would be to ignore the evidence before us. If we truly want to preserve the democratic values that have shaped Western civilization, we need to acknowledge the reality of these powerful networks. These organizations, with their vast financial resources, often exert influence over governments, turning them into something akin to puppet states that only advance a particular agenda. It's not about the economics or the policy, it's about a broader consolidation of power that ultimately undermines our national sovereignty. So after my research, I would say that the time has come to see through the veneer, the peeling veneer, and stand up for the principles that truly empower the people. Only by doing this can we hope to preserve the freedoms that we hold dear. Several members of the current Labour cabinet and Labour Party at large are affiliated and members of the Society. Notable examples include Rachel Reeves, Chancellor of the Exchequer, Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, and of course, Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party. There is rumour that the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, is potentially the chairman of the Fabian Society. Many of the members and half of the cabinet are linked to the Society. This influence isn't limited to politics. It also extends into the judiciary and also the legal system and police force as a whole, with many individuals holding positions of influence in these sectors. This interconnected situation can be seen in figures like Lord Hermer, whose recent actions have sparked concerns about the direction these ideas are taking. To preserve democratic values and ensure balance, transparent governance is crucial. It's crucial to be aware of these connections and their potential implications for us and our children in the future. Today's political and societal landscape and intertwining power of the influence can be very concerning and dark. When the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, the Chancellor of the Exchequer and other key figures in Parliament are all part of the same influential network, like the Fabian Society, it raises questions of impartiality and governance. This network doesn't just stop at politics, it extends so far, it's frightening. And when it's senior officials of all these people, we have a problem. This kind of overlap can be dangerous because it undermines the fundamental principles of impartiality and fairness that are supposed to be the cornerstones of a healthy democracy. When the same ideas and ideologies permeate from every level of governance, it becomes harder to ensure that decisions are made in the public's best interests, rather than serving a particular agenda of a particular group or organisation. The potential for bias, lack of transparency and groupthink is significant. It's essential for the health of any democracy that checks and balances remain intact, and that no single group holds too much influence over all sectors. By staying aware of these connections, it can help us work towards a more balanced and transparent system. When we think of secret societies, for example, Freemasonry, the very idea of influence in high positions and power, it can tend to evoke a sense of concern and intrigue. This is largely because of the magnitude of their presence and the mystery that surrounds them. Now, if we imagine a similar scenario with the Fabian Society, an organisation that, while not secret, is less known by the general public, it stands to reason that the same level of scrutiny and concern would be warranted. If we had widespread awareness that a single ideology was shaping not just politics, but also the judiciary and law enforcement, it would be sensible to raise similar concerns. In essence, the principle remains the same. Transparency and diverse representation are crucial to maintaining a healthy, balanced system. In a balanced view, it's important to recognise that Freemasonry today is far removed from secretive or mysterious image that it once had. It's no longer about world domination. I don't think it ever was, to be fair, looking at all that. It was never full of hidden agendas. Instead, it's very much open. It's a fraternity that focuses on community, charity, and personal development. Members regularly welcome the public into their halls to engage in open dialogue. And they have a strong charitable focus, supporting numerous causes over the years. They also emphasise respect, appreciation for their families, holding social events and ladies' nights to celebrate their contributions. How do I know? I used to be one. I guarantee you it's not the shadowy thing. I would be far more upset about what the Fabians has done. I've researched these guys for quite a while. So in contrast, the Fabian Society is a political organisation. It's more direct and has influence on actual policy and governance, while Freemasonry is open, community orientated and focuses on charity. The Fabians operate in the political sphere, shaping policies and ideas that influence wider society. So, while it's important to be vigilant about any concentrated influence in government, it's also fair to recognise the different roles and impacts these groups have on the modern world. Fabian Society was co-founded, as we know, by Sidney and Beatrice Webb. They were a married couple who were pivotal in shaping early socialist thought. Sidney Webb passed away in 1947, while his wife Beatrice in 1943. Initially, they were buried at their home, but later their remains were reburied in Westminster Abbey, a testament to that influence. Over time, the influence of the Webbs and the Fabian Society did actually wane, especially as new political movements emerged. However, the society experienced a revival with the establishment of the Young Fabians in 1960. It was aimed at engaging younger, more impressionable minds in their ideals. This helped keep the society relevant, pushing forward its vision of a more socialist future. Fabian Society founded was undeniably left with a lasting impression to the British socialist thought. Even as their direct influence waned over the decades, the society found new life through the Young Fabians. While this approach can be seen as a means of preserving the people's legacy, it does raise ethical questions about the kind of influence exerted on impressionable young minds. The society's vision, while rooted in ideals of social justice, also carries a certain level of utopianism that can be seen as potentially leading to a more controlled or uniform society. In essence, the push to engage youth in these ideals is a reminder of the importance of critical thinking and awareness, ensuring that the future we shape is balanced and truly reflective of diverse perspectives. Even today, the shadow of Tony Blair still looms over the Labour Party. His foundation continues to wield significant influence with strong ties to the World Economic Forum, suggesting that the legacy of his leadership still shapes Labour's direction to this very day. And in a rather unsettling twist, the very judge who overturned the Bell Hotel ruling, to the dismay of the wider British public, himself a key member of the Fabian Society. These connections underscore a continuing narrative of influence and the complexities behind the scenes. Marxism was a theory developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in the mid-19th century. It laid the groundwork for later communist ideologies. The first practical implementation of these ideals was in the Soviet Union following the 1917 revolution led by Lenin. Stalin's regime saw the worst excesses, resulting in millions of deaths due to purges, forced collectivization and famine, with estimates ranging from tens of millions to far more lives lost. Similarly, in China, Mao Zedong's policies such as the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution led to the massive upheaval and death toll in the tens of millions as well. This was due to starvation, persecution and social chaos. The biggest flaws in these regimes were their authoritarian nature, lack of political freedom and the economic inefficiencies which stifled innovation and led to widespread poverty. Does it sound familiar? Fast forward this to the modern era, and the dangers of echoing these flawed systems in any society, including Britain, are crystal clear. They could lead to economic downfall, loss of individual freedoms and widespread unemployment, leaving society in a precarious state. With all this history, the lessons in mind, it's hard not to draw parallels to the present. The echoes of the past failures within these systems can be seen in current policies, and it's crucial to recognize those signs. This isn't a conspiracy theory. The facts are as clear as the lessons of history. The path we tread now is a reminder to stay vigilant and safeguard our future. I thank you for taking the time to watch this documentary. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was enlightening and gained something for you. Don't forget, do subscribe, do like the video, and don't forget to share with others to show what we are facing. Take care. See you soon. Goodbye.